Hi everyone, I'm Tom and this is Julianna, and welcome to the show today. We have a very special episode in store. You're gonna love it. Today we're celebrating the 50-year anniversary of the Delphos, Kansas UFO incident, one of the most famous extraterrestrial stories in history. And this weekend, we have new clues, new evidence, new theories, and we're gonna be on a road trip. That's right. We're on the scene, traveling down the highway and getting answers like never before. Stay tuned, you are absolutely not gonna wanna miss this. And I think this show is gonna blow you away. Hello everyone, and welcome to one of the strangest and most fascinating UFO cases in American history. Our story begins in the Smoky Hills of north central Kansas, near a tiny town called Delphos, a name which derives from the god of Greek mythology, the son of Poseidon, who was from the town of Delphi, which seated the temple of Apollo upon a tall mountain, which warriors would ascend to consult the oracle of Delphi, who, according to Acts chapter 16, followed and harangued the first century Christians, until the Apostle Paul turned around and commanded her demon to be gone. Delphos, Kansas has something of an oracle of its own, a little person named Grace Bedell, who may have changed the course of American history. When Grace was very young, she wrote a letter to Abraham Lincoln, teasing him about his gawkish appearance, and saying that if he would only grow a beard, he could become president. It's said that this letter out of the blue angered Lincoln, and he almost wrote back telling her to mind her own business. But after cooling down for a day or so, he decided he would grow a beard and start wearing a stovepipe hat, which iconicized his unforgettable style and may have aided in propelling him to the presidency. There is a monument to Grace Bedell in Delphos, commemorating her famous letter, and the pen which wrote it is displayed in the town museum. And in New York State there is a statue of Grace Bedell, standing before her famous pen pal on the day they finally had a meeting, so he could express his gratitude for her plain-spoken recommendation. For the next 100 years in the lonely, dusty little town of Delphos, it almost seemed like nothing of any note would ever happen again. Until the day of the Delphos UFO event. It happened on November 2nd, 1971, on a farm northeast of town. A 16-year-old boy named Ronald Johnson was attending to a flock of sheep, when suddenly, he looked over towards the farmhouse and saw a mushroom-shaped object between 6 and 8 feet wide, suspended and levitating 3 feet over the ground. The stunned and mesmerized young man carefully walked closer to the object, which was about 100 feet away. But then, the colorful lights on the craft began flashing, and suddenly, Ronald and his dog Snowbell became frozen in place, like flies in amethyst. After a few moments, he was released from the suspended animation, and recovered well enough to run inside the house, where he told his parents about the vehicle outside, and said that he heard it making a mechanical sound, like an off-balance washing machine. The family quickly ran outside to the yard, but the object was gone. And then they looked up in the sky and saw the mushroom-shaped craft floating in the clouds, flashing with colorful lights and gently gliding southward until it disappeared from view. And then the family looked down and saw something else, a glowing white circle on the ground below where the spacecraft was hovering. Ronald's mother walked over and touched the circle to see if it was still hot, and was surprised when her hand went numb. The next morning, Ronald's father called the county sheriff, who told him other people in Delphos reported seeing a UFO around 7 p.m., including the school principal, who said he saw a ball of flashing colors. And at 7:30 p.m., a man named Lester Insbarger in the nearby town of Minneapolis advised a deputy on patrol of a strange floating light in the sky, gliding southward along the highway. Within a day or two, local newspapers arrived on scene to photograph the eerie-looking circle left on the ground, including one skeptical reporter who conjectured the discoloration of the topsoil was caused by a rusty old chicken pin he saw off to the side. And he also saw an old ladder that he supposed young Ronald had used to break the tree branches above the circle to support his wild story. An irritated Mr. Johnson informed the newsman, "We are a God-fearing family here. We don't make up lies." 2 weeks later, UFO researcher Ted Phillips came to investigate the site and was excited to see the circular mark on the ground was still visible days later. And in fact, it's 50 years later and the circle is still visible. Phillips documented that the dirt in the circle had been glazed and solidified into something like a pie crust, which moisture could not penetrate, and water would just bounce off. And later that winter, snow would not melt into it. It just remained frozen in a donut-shaped circle while the ground in and around it thawed. But the real surprise came when Ted Phillips extracted a clump of discolored soil to be tested at a laboratory. An analysis of the dirt showed it to be inundated with mycelium, the thread-like fibers on the underside of mushrooms. The import of this is unknown, but how peculiar that a mushroom-shaped spacecraft would leave a blast pattern composed of organic mushroom bits. At last, there seemed to be a plausible explanation of this strange account. The glowing circle may have been caused by bioluminescent mushrooms, also called alien mushrooms, which can glow in the dark, like something from Alice in Wonderland. And if young Ronald Johnson had accidentally been inhaling mushroom spores, perhaps the spaceship landing had all been a psychedelic hallucination. The numerous other sightings that evening of a flashing, multicolored spaceship above Delphos and Minneapolis were also explained away as likely being St. Elmo's fire, a static electricity field which sometimes shimmers and flashes around the hull of standard airplanes. But the UFO research community was not so quick to agree, pointing out that the evening of November 2nd was bright and clear, and also pointing out if the UFO landing circle was supposedly created by a rusty old chicken pen, how would a field of mushrooms be growing beneath a flock of pecking chickens? Anyone who's been on a farm knows better than that. In the pursuant 5 decades, the Delphos UFO landing site has been visited by researchers from as far away as California to Great Britain, with astonishing evidence being collected. Geiger counters raising levels at the scene, indicating possible irradiation. Healthy green trees above the landing spot, with branches that were broken and sheared by blunt force. And the fact that for many years, grass would not grow in the donut-shaped circle. Dirt clods taken from there would not submerge in water. And there is also the official reports of the sheriff, the sheriff's deputy, the Kansas Highway Patrol, and the Delphos Republican newspaper, who spent days investigating the incident of November 2nd and could find no holes in the story. The Delphos event has also been featured in UFO Magazine, the National Enquirer, and on the History Channel TV series UFO Files. But this weekend, on this episode, we are hoping to bring a fresh perspective as the famous case nears its 50-year anniversary. We're finally asking the question, Why? Why would a spaceship be floating over a farm in Kansas? As someone who lived in the Smoky Hill region in the 1980s and 90s, I have first-hand knowledge of the area which may be helpful in taking a new look at this cold case. And I'd like to present some points of curiosity that you, the viewer, might find interesting in forming your own hypothesis. You may already be aware that north central Kansas is where you will find the geodetic center of the United States, and where you will find the exact center of North America as well. But some people believe it's actually the exact center of the planet Earth. A topic which is touched on in the award-winning 2006 documentary Manhattan, Kansas. A true story of a young woman's attempt to rescue her estranged mother, who is searching for the cynosure of Earth in north central Kansas. This esoterica is sometimes connected to the enduring myth of Agartha, a subterranean continent at the core of our hollow globe, and the theory that its hidden entrance can be pinpointed by calculating the radial point of the world map. 5 miles south of Delphos is the Sunset Spiritualist Church and Campsite, a religious order founded in Delphos in 1876, which seeks to attain higher knowledge by combining religion, science, and mythology. Directly west of the Sunset Camp is an oddity known as Rock City, a field of large circular rocks and a grass prairie. The history and happenstance of these enormous rocks just laying in a field has been debated. But the Sunset Spiritualists believe the layout of Rock City may be a yet undeciphered message left by extraterrestrials, or even a star map of divine origin. 20 miles south of Delphos is one of the longest aerial strips in America, at the Salina Regional Airport, which during the Space Shuttle era was a NASA-designated runway for alternate landings. The airstrip was used by businessman adventurer Steve Fawcett for the first non-stop solo global flight in history, shortly before his own disappearance. In the 20th century, Salina was home to Hawker Beechcraft Designs, an air hangar rumored to work on top-secret aircraft. I remember one day in the late 1980s, as a student at Salina Public Schools, hearing a sonic boom so loud, the ceiling tiles fell down onto our classroom desks. That was a surprising day. Salina was also home to the 58th Bomber Wing at Schilling Air Force Base, the B-29 Combat Wing, and the Super Fortress Bomber, which conducted the first long-range bombardment of the Pacific Islands in World War II. The base later stationed 2 B-47 Stratojets, and was briefly used as the U.S. Strategic Air Command during the Korean War. Southwest of Salina is the Smoky Hill Weapons Range, a bombing and artillery zone used for testing instruments of war. But some say it's actually a place for testing flying saucers, and a cover story for the unearthly flashes regularly seen in the night sky. It's also a thinly veiled secret that there is some sort of military base deep underground beneath the Smoky Hills, and a much better known secret that these hills concealed numerous nuclear missile silos during the Cold War years of the mid-20th century. A map on the website Dark Kansas shows Nike Hercules silos at Delphos, Smolin, Bennington, and Tesket, and Atlas F launchers beneath Wells, Minneapolis, and the ghost town of Carniero, Kansas. 1 mile south of Carniero, we will find a winding bend of the Smoky Hill River, an ancient fishing and hunting ground of Native Americans. You see, the Smoky Hills are a region of small sandstone formations that follow the river east through the state and then north towards Nebraska. The Solomon River, which Delphos sits on, feeds into this mighty watershed, which dams at Canopolis Recreational Area, a few hundred yards south of Carniero, Kansas, where you will discover prehistoric rock carvings of an unknown people. These petroglyphs are hundreds of years old, and may have been etched by the Plains Apache who once camped on these grounds. But what these pictures of strange humanoids in some kind of suits or armor are meant to depict has never been understood. The figures are upright and stand like humans, but don't look like any humans on Earth. As we walk 10 minutes north along the Smoky Hill Trail, we will find another point of interest, a summit place and ceremonial ground for ancient Native Americans, which is now called Mushroom Rock State Park, with revelations to behold that I think you will find eye-opening. So get your coolers and your backpack ready because we have a long hike ahead. We're on the ground this weekend, looking for forensic clues that may give insight into one of America's greatest UFO stories of all time. And we're very glad that you're coming along. Let's get started. Hey, we should have brought some hot dogs.
Hey, that's not a bad idea.
Hot dogs and chips. Now we want to be very careful where you step here because that... well, that would make for a very hilarious video, but I think you would be one grumpy customer if you went tumbling down this, that's like something from the Apple Dumpling Gang, but I'm not Don Knotts, and I don't think you'd find that very funny. Just worried I didn't give you any ideas about sending me over the edge here.
I need you to drive the buggy back.
All right, let's explore down here. Oh, my goodness. All right, shall we have a look around down here?
Yeah, are we going down the stairs?
Yeah, let's go down this thing. But be careful because I don't want you to have any tumbles.
Oh, wow, wow.
Hey, go for it. Oh, wow. You found your own roller coaster. Hey, this would be a fun ride if you go flying into the water.
Yeah.
We're actually at the convergence of the Smoky Hill River and the Sand Creek, which goes through southern Kansas, and the Smoky Hill goes through northern Kansas, meeting of two legendary creeks. Although the Smoky Hill region stretches almost 600 miles, beginning in Colorado, it primarily refers to an area between Salina, Kansas and Ellsworth, Kansas, with 7 small mountains called the Smoky Hills. These 7 hills are at the epicenter of a 500-year-old Mexican legend called Quivira, the story of the 7 cities of gold, which almost certainly were 7 Native American villages located along this river, which suddenly and mysteriously disappeared.
You may want to go up this way. There's a lot of gnats down here.
Leave it to me to want to climb in high hills.
What's fun is you can get right up by the water here. I think you'll be all right. What do you think? Should we jump in? No? All right. Give it a good toss. We're training for baseball season. Whoa! Hey, not bad. Hey, I think you make a good player on a baseball team.
Okay, let's try one more time. I need one more rock.
Hey, look around. All right, see if you can hit a fish. I mean, really clobber it. What do you call that maneuver?
You better edit that out.
We'll discuss it. We'll discuss it later. Hey!
I need to find another rock now.
All right, we'll give it one more shot here.
Oh my God. Piece of wood.
Hey, yeah, go for it. Throw it like a hatchet. Pretend you're Thor on the Avengers.
All right.
Tomahawk chop that thing. Whoa, dude! Yeah, good throw. Great job on that.
Redemption.
The Smoky Hills were named over 150 years ago by pioneers in covered wagons, who, upon their arrival, saw smoke signals rising from Indian villages in the hills. During the onset of the Pikes Peak Gold Rush of 1858, an ancient Native American deer hunting path called the Smoky Hill Trail provided the shortest, fastest route for gold prospectors on their way to Colorado, and it's the same ancient trail we'll be utilizing on our mission today. And as much as we're enjoying this small picnic area here, we must now continue onward, searching for clues and insight about this very old and mysterious land. Today we begin at Canopolis Lake, a large recreation and boating area created by damming the Smoky Hill River. On the far side of the water sits the town of Canopolis, population 400, which is said to be haunted because of the army post once stationed there during the Indian Wars of 1867 to 1872. The outpost was named for General Charles Garrison Harker, and the legend goes that one day he was riding along the canyon rim with his Indian guide when suddenly he spotted a beautiful wild horse atop the canyon. Bright white with glowing eyes, it was the finest stallion he had ever seen. "I must have that creature." "That," said his Indian guide, "is a spirit animal. It belongs in the spirit world. There is no man alive who could tame it." "A challenge," retorted Harker. He stood tall in his saddle and began charging after the wild stallion. With rumbling hooves and clouds of dust, he galloped along. The pursuit continued all around the rim of the canyon gorge until finally Harker built up enough speed and was able to ride alongside the wild horse, where courageously he jumped from his saddle and landed on the wild stallion. At last he was in control of this incredible horse. He lassoed its neck and eased it to slow down. And then he trotted the majestic animal back over to his Indian guide. "A spirit horse, you say?" laughed General Harker, beaming with pride and contentment. "No man alive could tame him, you say?" The Indian guide just looked at him and said something inaudible. "What's that?" said Harker. The guide said something again, but couldn't be heard. "Speak up, man! I can't hear what you're saying!" The Indian guide shook his head and pointed over the canyon ledge, where General Harker looked over and saw himself, his dead body laying on the floor of the canyon below. The small canyon, which is on the northeast shore of Canopolis Lake, is now known as Buffalo Canyon Trail and was used as a fortress hideout by Sioux Indian buffalo hunters in the late 1800s. A great irony is that the Sioux Indians would actually steal horses from the army outpost, which was assigned to be chasing them, and at night they would hide the horses in the narrow canyon, which served as a natural corral. It was later named Buffalo Canyon because cowboys camping overnight there woke up to the rumbling sound of a ghost herd of spirit buffalo, and they even saw tracks on the ground the next day. And now, continuing west along the Smoky Hill Trail, will take us to a little place called Mushroom Rock State Park. A picnic place with restrooms and a water fountain, and also some very strange rock formations. And I think you better come along with us, because what you see here may give you pause, and it may also give you some ideas to think about. Mushroom Rock Park was discovered in the late 1800s. It is actually very old. Many years ago, Native American tribes would hold meetings here, build campfires, dance and celebrate, because they believed this place was supernatural.
Now be careful on this bridge. No more of your sliding tricks. I saw that maneuver you pulled earlier. Just remember, that's not a roller coaster track for you to go down. I just seen you go up and down these rails like a skateboard. Remember, this is not a skateboard video. Up here, I think you might find this very interesting.
It looks like there's a rock upside down or something.
Have you ever seen the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
I have. It looks like a UFO taking off.
That's what it looks like to you?
Yeah.
Well, that's what it looks like to everyone else, too.
Wow. Exactly what it looks like, yep.
Were you expecting to see this out in the field?
Big rock.
Very large and very unusual.
So this is in close proximity to the UFO landing that's around here?
Yes, we are in northern Kansas. We're very close to the famous Delphos UFO incident. Now, could you look at something else and tell me what you see?
Here?
Yep.
Yeah, it's almost as if something landed right here.
You ever heard of the gray aliens?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You're saying the big eyes right here? Big eye sockets, and then like the large head. I see it. I totally see it. Deep eye sockets right here. And then that...
The huge head?
Yep, that huge head. Oh, man. That's two creepy coincidences together, isn't it?
It's almost like an alien face. It's covered with dirt. It's just this thing that's here. I mean, my goodness.
It's like a perfect circle of an eye socket right here.
It is, this strange face that's just in the ground. I wish we could excavate some of this dirt and see the entire thing, but you can imagine here what we're looking at.
Yeah.
It's like an alien's face. The gray alien. Look at this. It's almost like Noah's Ark. It's almost like you could climb in there like a spaceship and operate it. Like this is...
Oh, yeah.
Like this is a little thing and that's your little view screen on the ship.
Yes. This would be like the bridge.
It is. This almost looks like a starfighter. Why don't you climb in there and see if you can operate that thing? Yes, you have quite a craft here. Do you see what I mean, though?
Yes, I absolutely see what you mean.
This thing is almost like an ancient spaceship.
What I can tell you,
man! What? Oh my goodness!
Been out here all day.
This is like bringing Garfield the cat out somewhere. What's remarkable to me is that this is also the same size and shape as the Delphos UFO.
Officially speaking, these geoformations were created long ago by millions of years of wind and water. But honestly, some of it almost looks sculpted. Standing here, you will start to wonder if maybe the Native Americans actually carved these rocks to resemble what they had seen with their own eyes. Some of these stones look like small UFOs with plumes of exhaust lifting them from below. You may also wonder if the aliens themselves could have melted these rocks into this shape with their ray beams to symbolize something to the Native Americans or to congregate them at this place. A famous early visitor here was the gunfighter Kit Carson, and in one of his comic books, he takes refuge here by climbing atop one of the rocks and using his six-shooters to fend off a group of outlaws chasing after him. Another gunfighter, Buffalo Bill Cody, also visited Mushroom Rocks, and it was here that he had a meeting with the Native American chief Black Wolf, whom a nearby ghost town is named after. A great distance to the west at Ogalla, Kansas, is where Wild Bill Hickok uncovered a plot to frame the Sioux Indians for a string of bank robberies. And he arrested the actual villains. An escapade which in the 1950s became a children's story featured in the Little Golden Book series. And it was through his friend Wild Bill that Buffalo Bill Cody was introduced to the Sioux tribe and met Black Elk, a cousin of Crazy Horse, who joined him as sidekick on some of his greatest adventures. In 1932, Black Elk wrote a book with stories from his life. In one chapter, he tells the story of waking up one night and seeing a small metal saucer come down from the sky. And when it landed, little men came out and began speaking to him without moving their mouths. This may sound like a typical fever dream of someone who watches too much TV. But Black Elk did not own a TV. And he told this story almost 90 years ago. At approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon, our journey brought us to a place on the map called Carneiro, a Latin word which means sheep or rams. It was so named because the ranchers of this area herd sheep, just like on the Ronald Johnson farm. Walking through this quiet little town now, it's almost surreal to imagine just a few hundred feet away, an intercontinental ballistic missile was housed and ready to rain down upon the enemies of this nation. The subterranean bunker is now defunct, abandoned, and has been internally flooded by the nearby Smoky Hill River. The ICBMs of central Kansas were dismantled following the SALT Treaty, also known as the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks between the United States and Russia in the early 1970s. But at one time, this region had 22 underground missile sites, during an era of world history known as the Cold War, a period of distrust and espionage between superpowers that led to ever-complexifying military industry. In fact, some say that there is a network of tunnels interconnecting secret bases across the American West, from S4 in Nevada to Los Alamos in New Mexico, to Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, to NORAD's Underground Command Center in Colorado. Supposed whistleblowers have come forward claiming that this enormous network of tunnels is hundreds of miles long and facilitated by hyperspeed railway, and also that there are extraterrestrials stationed below ground cooperating with the shadow government. Of course, these could all be made-up stories. Anything regarding flying saucers could be hoaxes or lies. It raises the question we're all wondering to ourselves. What if nothing happened at Delphos, Kansas? What if a 16-year-old boy made up a fantasy because he was standing around herding a flock of sheep and he was bored? Coinciding with Cold War hysteria of the mid-20th century was UFO mania. And coinciding with that was the popularization of science fiction in television and movies of the time. What if Ronald Johnson imagined what he thought he saw? Spurred on by crafted and preconceived ideas of what a spaceship from another world looks like. What if it was a mirage? Or even some real object that was misidentified in a panic? A cloud, for instance. If you've ever heard of a microburst, which is a very rare weather phenomenon, in which a lone cloud can float near the ground and pour down rain in a concentrated spot. Maybe that's what Ronald Johnson saw. A random, very small rain cloud floating just over the ground. It was tiny, mushroom-shaped, and pouring tons of rain. And that's what he mistook for the jet exhaust beneath the craft. Ron described a streaming, shimmering exhaust in a circle beneath the UFO. A microburst can also produce wind blasts of 150 miles an hour, which could be why Ron and his dog seemed frozen in place when they tried to approach it. There is a problem here, though. Ronald and his parents said nothing about the ground being wet with rain. In fact, quite the opposite. But there could be another weather situation at work here. A far more common event called a dust devil. A spontaneous whirlwind a few feet wide and usually 10 to 20 feet tall, and oftentimes mushroom-shaped at the top. It's like a miniature tornado which churns dust from the ground into a column several feet high, and then after a few seconds dissipates into thin air, and sometimes leaves circles imprinted in the ground, much like the circle imprint of the Delphos landing site. And if the dust devil tore up a field of luminescent mushrooms, maybe that was the gentle glittering space beam that Ronald saw beneath the craft. And as the warm air of the whirlwind continued to rise, it may have carried the glittering bits of luminescent mushroom into the sky, or even shiny aluminum debris from the farm. And that's what Ronald's parents glimpsed in the sky, and what their neighbors also glimpsed in the sky. Storm debris from a small but powerful tornado. It could explain the circle grooved into the earth, and also the power to break tree branches above it. But here is the most key piece of evidence. Ronald told his parents that what he saw made the sound of a tumbling washing machine. People who have been within 100 feet of a tornado have described it in two ways. The first is they said it sounds like a train. The second most common description is the sound of a giant washing machine.
We almost use this for a divining rod. Up ahead. I think I found another point of interest. Remember how we were talking about flying saucers on the way over here?
Yes.
Look on top of that cliff.
More flying saucers?
A carving of a flying saucer.
I knew exactly what you were talking about as soon as you pointed that direction. Very clear.
Do you think we could hike up there?
Yes.
This stick will help. By the way, this is a good stick here. According to legend, Native Americans lived here in a village centuries ago.
Oh. You see here.
Very muddy in there.
It is very muddy. I love the natural color that the wall is making. Just, I mean, the green, blue, it's just so pretty.
Yes, it's a shame that the creek has overtaken it here. The floor is just water.
Yes. Whoa! Give me that camera! You gotta see the spider. Oh my god, it's flipping gigantic. Did you see that thing? It was like this
Yeah.
big. Oh my gosh, it was huge. That was like prehistoric.
Unfortunately, the Smoky Hill River has overrun these caves, and the entire floor is water.
God, I can see it again. It's so big. Let's see if I can get its legs. I just gotta see it, Daddy.
Okay. Very old cave. Unfortunately, the Smoky Hill River over here has overrun the cave, and the bottom is water. You can see a creek streaming out here. Of interest to me is the large structure on top of this cliff that resembles the shape of a flying saucer. Once again, we have a saucer-shaped anomaly in the same vicinity. Do you think we could possibly scale this?
Dang it, if that tree wasn't right there. It's a handprint.
My goodness, are you serious?
It's been carved in there, but yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah.
This is old. We've discovered petroglyphs in the rock. This almost looks like a K. It's some sort of symbol. Beside it, we have a handprint that does not look like a human hand. Long, spindly fingers, like something a gray alien would have.
For a moment, I had to stop and look at this confounding petroglyph. It almost looks like the letter K. I stood there for a minute trying to decipher if it was some sort of logo or symbol. And then, a few seconds later, I remembered something. The Zeta Reticuli star system, when drawn into a constellation, resembles a crooked letter K. Zeta Reticuli is a place in the night sky approximately 39 light years away, and is widely believed to be the home of the gray aliens, and also the origin planet of the Roswell spacecraft. In 1961, someone claiming to be abducted by aliens under hypnosis drew a map of the Zeta Reticuli system and said they saw it on the spaceship's view screen. Well, thank you all for coming along this weekend. It's just been terrific. And our discoveries and whatever evidence we have collected, of course, is left open to your interpretation. It could be that the large mushroom-shaped features we saw in the Smoky Hills today are really nothing more than old weathered rocks. But when you're standing right there, something about it seems more significant than that. The Great Plains Apaches, who once had their villages here, are distantly connected to the tribes of the desert Southwest, who also long ago carved pictures of spacemen and flying ships, and told stories of the Star People, tales of visitors who descended like falling stars from the cosmos. It should be noted that the last thing the Star People told the American Indians before leaving is that one day they would return. As we weigh the evidence at hand, it seems almost certain that something extremely strange truly did happen one evening in 1971 near Delphos. But what it actually was hasn't been found out in 50 years. and it may be another 50 years still to go. What we do know is that we had a wonderful time this episode. So please take care, everyone, and have a great weekend. And always keep cruising down the highway, because one day you may see something absolutely amazing, and you don't want to miss it.